From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Bursell. This is The Log. If you're not following this story, I want to encourage you. On January 28th, the FBI raided a warehouse holding records from the Fulton County Elections Board in Atlanta. They got themselves a warrant to collect all the physical evidence from the 2020 election. This, of course, based on the Orange Menace's big lie that 2020 was stolen, that he cites almost daily. This is the kind of thing that he wanted his prior administration to do, and they wouldn't do it. Attorney General Bill Barr said, no, 2020 wasn't stolen. 60-some separate court cases all came down against the claim. Multiple audits, recounts. The final one, every single ballot counted by hand. But it's a new day in Dodge, and Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel and the rest of the kooks and cranks are ready to say yes sir, no sir, jump how high to whatever the Miller-Vogt regime decides. So voter rolls, paper ballots, tabulations, everything is now in possession of the regime. They are outside the so-called chain of custody, which is the most important element of election security. Boards of elections across the country take this very seriously. That's over. I'm not going to try to tell you the whole story. It's very complicated, and honestly, I'm not the person to do that for you. There's good reporting out there. I would recommend one in particular. I saw a great piece from Katie Fang. Do you remember that name? She used to be a reporter, an anchor. I think she had her own show for quite a while on MSNBC. Well, she got fired, of course, because, I don't know, didn't have the right attitude, didn't have the right skin color. MSNBC's fired a lot of people over the last couple of years. What are they? MS Now, I think they're called. Now. Anyway, Katie Fang has a YouTube channel as part of the Midas Touch Network, and I stumbled across this report, and damn, she's like an entirely different person. So just on a side note, yeah, if you're still relying on the corporate cable networks, CNN, MS Now, you got to break that habit. You got to get that monkey off your back. Her clarity, her attitude, everything about the report was so much better than anything I've ever seen on MSNBC, or MS Now, as it's now called. So with that little side note, do seek out Katie Fang. She's doing a hell of a job. And she did a great report on this story. Pointed out a couple of just weird little details here. The head of the FBI in Atlanta was fired just days before this raid. It was only a week or two ago in Davos, remember, when the Orange Menace said, oh, we're finding out lots of things about this 2020 election. People will be arrested and tried. Remember that? And then less than 2 weeks later, there it is. Another very strange thing about this story is that Tulsi Gabbard was on site for this raid. She's the director of national intelligence. What the hell has she got to do with elections? For that matter, what has the federal government got to do? What has the executive branch of the federal government have to do with state elections? Yeah, I know it's a presidential election. I know it's federal, but the states are in charge. The White House, the Oval Office, the Department of Justice has absolutely nothing to do. Well, anyway, I won't go down any rabbit holes here today. Another person on scene, and forgive me if I get this one wrong because I don't remember, but it was a high official from the Civil Rights Division of DOJ. Now, the head of Civil Rights Division of DOJ is named Harmeet Dillon. So I think maybe that was the person, but I'm not going to say because I don't remember exactly. But there was a top official from the Civil Rights Division of DOJ, which basically doesn't exist anymore. It certainly has nothing to do with civil rights, with whatever they're doing. It's kind of like, what's his name? Doug Burgum of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Has nothing at all whatsoever to do with environmental protection anymore. In fact, just the opposite. It has everything to do with private industry exploiting the environment. We're in the upside down, what's it called? Oh, bizarro. That's it. We're in the bizarro world in some of these cases. Yeah, EPA now enables industry to exploit the environment. The Civil Rights Division of the DOJ apparently these days does pretty much nothing, and when they do act, it's to assist in the violation of civil rights. There you go. Another rabbit hole I won't go down. So this is a hell of a story, and I really want you to be alarmed by it. I want you to know about it. I want you to look into it. I want you to tell your friends about it. The regime has seized election materials. They've been after this for a while. They've written several states. I saw the number was 28, I think. The more high-profile requests we've seen were from Maine and Minnesota, requesting voter rolls, voter information. And this is everything. This is the ballots themselves, names, social security numbers. Yeah, it's voter rolls. It's the tabulations that counted the votes. Again, all of this litigated already in multiple court cases. All of it settled by multiple recounts, audits. So I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what's going on, but the commentary I'm hearing so far makes a lot of sense. And that is that, yes, of course, it's about the Orange Menace, his ego, his retribution. He wants to put people in jail who did not cooperate with him on stealing the 2020 election. Namely, people like Brad Raffensperger. You remember the famous phone call. You got to find me 11,780 votes, which is just one more than we need. We all heard the phone call. His efforts to steal the election in Georgia was investigated in Fulton County, and a grand jury indicted the Orange Menace and his accomplices for attempting to steal the election, the very same election he's now trying to turn on its head. So yeah, it is about his ego. It is about his retribution. But according to the commentary I'm hearing, and it makes perfect sense to me, it's just as much about rigging 2026 and rigging 2028. Why do you think they want all this voter information? Why do you think they're doing everything within their power to purge voting rolls? Everything in their power to restrict the time you have to vote. They want to reduce the days. No early voting, or very, very limited early voting. No drop boxes. No mail-in votes. They want to make people stand in line for hours and hours at a time, especially people in cities, in so-called blue cities, especially people of color in so-called blue cities. Yeah, you got to stand in line for 8 hours. And we'll make it against the law to give you any water while you're in line. It's all about rigging 26. They know they're going to lose. They can look at polls. And they're looking ahead to 2028. And another rabbit hole I won't go down today. There are plenty of rabbit holes I could have gone down today. I got to pat myself on the back for being so disciplined. But of course, the big one is 2028. And I firmly believe he has every intention to stay exactly where he is. By election night 2028, when he loses, or when he wins by nefarious measures. Yeah, I know it's a third term. See, that's one of the other theories. That sounds crazy when you first hear it. But what's too crazy for this guy? The theory goes that they prove somehow in court that 2020 was rigged, which means that was indeed his second term, legally, technically speaking. I know it sounds crazy. I'm just repeating a theory. And the craziest theories don't sound so crazy once he gets his hands on them. So that's the idea. He proves that 2020 was technically his second term because he actually won, which means 2024 is his third term, which is against the Constitution, but since he's already here, well, I guess we'll have to do something about I forget, which one is that? It's the 22nd Amendment. It says you can only have 2 terms. Well, if 2024 is now the third term, well, that's already blown out of the water. So technically, I guess that 22nd Amendment is now null and void. So yeah, I can stay for yet another term, or as many terms as I want. Yes, I know it sounds insane. This is where we are now. In fact, while we're here, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I've never said this out loud to anybody. I've never said it to you. I've never even said it to my closest friends and family. I firmly believe that 2024 was rigged. They're showing us what they're capable of. Remember that cryptic remark the Orange Menace made at one of the inaugural events, talking about the swing states and how Elon Musk really knows about those computers? Yeah, he won all 7 swing states. In the last moment, he drew a royal flush. And I've seen many reports since then about how it's just mathematically impossible for him to have won with the numbers he supposedly did. And I've always kind of scrolled right past those stories. I've skimmed them. I went ahead and read a few of them. I didn't want to believe it. I thought, even if it's true, well, what can we do now? It's resurfaced in my mind, put it that way. Again, there's always a lag between this recording and the time you hear the program. I have no way of knowing what's happened to this story in that time. But it's big. In my opinion, this is a very big story. I really think you should know about it. They're absolutely trying to make 2026 irrelevant. It doesn't matter who you vote for. They're trying to fix 2028. I believe 2024 was rigged. Again, they tried this all before. They've been indicted. We've got them dead to rights on the crimes they attempted in 2020. And now, instead of getting the old gang back together because they failed, he's got a new gang put together, and they're running the same playbook. Well, Friday, as is often the custom, was News Dump Day. You know about that, right? Lawmakers, officials, people who with press releases who don't want you really to know the news. It's unpopular stuff. They dump it on a Friday afternoon so fewer people will see it. That's a long-standing tradition. So, of course, that's how the latest release of Epstein files were announced. You and I have talked about it a couple times. I'm just entirely annoyed by the whole story. This was never going to go well. There are an estimated 6 million documents or pages. I just forget which is which. Anyway, 6 million units remaining. They released approximately half and just announced, that's it, we're done now, all over. What's in the other 3 million? No comment. Complete frustration from pretty much everybody right, left, and center. Khanna and Massey, the 2 representatives who wrote the bill, the transparency bill. The victims, of course. But I'm sorry, call me a pessimist. This was never going to work. They've got too many excuses to fall back on, and the problem is some of the excuses have merit. So many mentions of victims in these documents that the law itself allows them to redact. There's always been a problem with releasing damning evidence about people who you've decided internally there's not enough evidence to bring charges, and yet you think it's all right to release this material to the public when that person can't defend themselves in a court of law? None of this ever made sense. Of course I want justice for the victims, but we got to find another way to do this. I'm not excusing the regime, far from it. They're doing everything they can to gum up the works, to just force us all to throw up our hands. They released these 3 million pages or documents, including videos, in a way that shows clearly they are intentionally trying to make them difficult to sift through, to search, to analyze. They just toss them out like a giant haystack, leaving it to the press to try to uncover the needle. The regime also announced that they've arrested journalist Don Lemon, formerly of CNN, kind of a household name. I think everybody knows who Don Lemon is from his days at CNN. Well, now he's an independent journalist. They arrested him, his crew, and a fellow local journalist from Minnesota. Here, let me get her name for you because I forgot it. Fort is the last name. Yeah, Georgia Fort. So they were covering that protest from a couple of weeks ago when a bunch of protesters interrupted a church service because the pastor there was an ICE official. Now, everybody in their partisan corners already has decided exactly how they feel about this. And I'm probably 99% with a very simple idea: you don't arrest journalists for covering a story. Here's my 1% doubt. We're in a new world where advocacy journalism is a thing. I mean, it's always been a thing, but now, with great encouragement from lots of people, including myself, independent journalists, independent reporters are becoming more and more active, more and more prominent. What's his name? Costa, also from CNN. We talk a lot here about Ken Klippenstein and the great reporting he's doing. Even organizations like Midas Touch and Bulwark, they're independent. They're not big corporate outfits by any stretch. They're on one side of this ledger. And some of them are sort of straight journalists. Others are more advocacy journalists. And I think that's a very legitimate thing to be. But much of U.S. law, as it regards the rights and privileges of journalists, well, it depends on a particular definition of what a journalist is, of what the free press is. And the very definition, the whole idea of what a journalist is currently in flux. So the laws surrounding journalism are going to be in flux too. They may need some amending. And in the meantime, in this case anyway, the regime is obviously exploiting the ambiguity of our current situation. So even though I'm inclined to oppose the regime almost automatically at every turn, in this case, they very well may have a point. And yes, of course, they're exploiting the opportunity. They're being cynical about it. They're being dishonest about it. All the things that the regime is famous for and capable of. But what they're exploiting is an actual problem. And it's a much bigger problem, more systemic, philosophical, than I think anybody wants to admit. I've been saying for decades that the very idea of objective journalism is unrealistic. I've been saying for decades that advocacy journalism is absolutely still journalism. It's nothing to be ashamed of or to hide from. Few people I know have a stronger point of view than myself, and I advocate for that point of view. But I never, ever ignore facts or mislead or, God forbid, lie to advance my point of view. Never. Neither do I go out of my way to both sides every story, because a lot of stories don't deserve both sides. To the extent I'm a journalist, which I'm really not. I'm not a reporter. I'm a commentator. But to the extent I am a reporter or journalist, because often I'm telling you stories, and maybe you're hearing it for the first time, which I guess makes me a reporter. I'm reporting it to you. So in that sense, I take a serious vow. I have an absolute responsibility to be truthful about the story I'm quote-unquote reporting, about my feelings on that story. But none of that mitigates my truthfulness. They don't stand in opposition. And I'm just one of many voices. I don't expect you to only listen to me. The very nature of journalism is changing, especially in this age when Barry Weiss's CBS News is becoming Patty Chayefsky's Howard Beale's NewsHour from Network with Sarah the Soothsayer. When billionaire oligarchs now have a monopoly on social media. So the independent journalists, the independent reporters are becoming more and more important and actually essential, vital, if we want to have anything resembling a free press, especially investigative reporting. There's no going back. The independent journalist of today is our best and only hope going forward, until somebody invents something entirely new. Unless my ideas of abolishing money and profit somehow magically rule the day, social anarchism somehow becomes the norm. Great. But until then, this is what we've got. Independent journalists have to be able to work. Advocacy journalism is nothing to be ashamed of. The laws, the rules, the norms have to evolve. And right now, we're nowhere near that evolution, and the regime is taking advantage of it to put 2 journalists in jail if they can. Now, the good news, 2 sitting judges have already denied the regime the pleasure of charging Lemon and Fort. Several personnel within the DOJ refused to bring charges in this case. Attorney General Pam Bondi herself had to sign the affidavit. So it'll probably go nowhere. But the very fact that they're doing it is just one more very alarming development from the regime, thrown out with the Friday news dump. Well, of course, the lawless ICE surge remains the top story, as it should be, as appropriate. Over the weekend, hundreds of massive protests across the United States, tens of thousands of people in every state. So that's good. The variety of people is also good. I mean, we're seeing everybody, just everybody. Teachers, students, there have been dozens, I don't know, maybe hundreds of walkouts from high school students. Just folks of all stripes. Even celebrities, sports stars. It sounds trivial, but I don't think it is. Anybody with a platform needs to use that platform, and more are. So that's great. My one word of advice is I would encourage everyone speaking up to broaden their focus a little bit, because as bad as this ICE story is, and of course it is, the operation in Venezuela continues. We've created a vassal state. That's the term being thrown around. It's a new era of strongman colonialism. I don't know how Cuba is going to survive this. It's hard to see how they will, with the United States pulling every economic lever. Yeah, when you have the most powerful economy in the world, you don't always have to send in the Marines. The regime loves to use tariffs as a weapon, sanctions, boycotts. They know what they're doing. So, yeah, Cuba is now cut off from the lifeline that was Venezuela. Money, oil. Threats to Iran continue. Ships relocated from the Caribbean now back to the Middle East. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians are without power in the middle of a cold winter because strongman Vladimir Putin pretty much has the blessings of the regime. Diplomatic geniuses Witkoff and Kushner have made Moscow their second home, and they seem to be spending most of their time trying to secure deals for themselves. An Israeli airstrike in Gaza killed dozens of people. The last estimate I saw was at least 40. It's probably more. While they look the world straight in the face and call this a ceasefire, when they're already on to the next phase where they turn Gaza into a playground for the global elite, ethnically cleansed of Palestinians. So, yeah, protests, demonstrations, organizing, direct action, it's all well and good. I just think it's time for the whole movement to be generalized a little bit. I mean, there are dozens of offenses by the regime every day. Abuse of power, breaking state and federal laws, violating the Constitution 100 different ways, breaking international laws. I just think our vision needs to be a little broader. And what we're asking for needs to be deeper. Entire systems that have brought about these problems need to be dismantled. This is no time to be cherry picking. Because then you just get into this Groundhog Day where every day's headline is just another iteration of yesterday's headline. A federal judge just ruled against the Minnesota Attorney General, Governor, and Mayor of Minneapolis regarding the surge in Minneapolis, ruled in favor of the regime. Democratic leadership in the House and Senate are asking for so-called concessions, basically just asking ICE to follow the law. That's the depth of their imagination. Yeah, we won't fund ICE until they stop breaking the law, laws that are already on the books. What kind of vision is that? Representatives Joaquin Castro and Jasmine Crockett visited Liam Ramos, the little 5-year-old boy, being detained, being held, being imprisoned in Texas. His father said Liam is so depressed that he sleeps most of the time. The two Congress members reported that Liam was pretty much catatonic the whole time they were visiting. Castro said it wasn't so much that he was asleep, he was just unresponsive, just laying there with his eyes closed. That's just frightening. That's just, how horrific is that? A 5-year-old boy being held in detention for no damn reason. In one of just hundreds of these centers. They're building these so-called mega facilities everywhere, using parts of military bases, decommissioned bases, prisons. They're using some of that $75 billion they already have in the kitty to buy up massive industrial warehouses. Plans for up to 100,000 detainees at a time. For hardened criminals? No, for people like Liam and his dad. The system itself, either through incompetence or more likely through intentional strategy, unable to even tell us the whereabouts of thousands. The number was estimated at 5,784 individuals disappeared by ICE. So all of this, on top of endangering the entire globe, on top of accelerating the climate crisis, on top of sending a plurality of Americans into economic stagnation, if not actual poverty, on top of the grift with the Orange Menace and his family doubling, tripling their net worth, legalized bribery on a global scale, on top of the abuse of the pardon power to give license to his henchmen, on top of murdering people on the high seas, on top of capturing the media, silencing free press by intimidation, by threatening jail, on top of attempting to silence political opponents, threatening prosecution and jail, on top of rigging elections. As bad as the ICE story is, it's part of a much larger story, and our protests, our demonstrations, our direct action need to reflect that. And what we're demanding needs to reflect that. We're not demanding reformer on the edges. We're demanding the removal of the regime, the demagnification of America, and the full force and weight of a renewed American justice system to convict this gang of murderers and criminals. Yeah, let's widen our scope. Let's articulate our demands far beyond simple reform or standard electoral politics. We need to meet this moment recognizing its depth, its scope, and recognizing that every headline is not just today's new problem, but rather another iteration of the existential threat that is MAGA. This episode and all episodes can be heard at the website, charlespurcell.com, or of course on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Blue Sky and Substack. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. All right, I love you. I'll see you out there.